Australia has just conducted probably our boldest electoral experiment since the military conscription plebiscites of 1916 and 1917, in the words of Liberal Senator Dean Smith, the author of the Private Members Bill that will now carry the result of the marriage plebiscite into law. At a time when public faith in political institutions is being sorely tested, even opponents of the postal survey or plebiscites more generally, and they included Smith himself, must concede the Australian people have reminded us that they are the true custodians of our civic character. Politicians on all sides tell us that now that the people have spoken, the Parliament will debate and legislate and show us Parliament at its finest or Parliament at its best. Freed of their partisan constraints, and with a new mistakable mandate to fulfill, there is consensus that our parliamentarians will now change the marriage law swiftly and effectively and with some semblance of dignity. But then they immediately tell us that we must let it happen again. Q. If it's such a good outcome, why can't we make use of the plebiscite mechanism more often? Because, Dean Smith tells us, of its corrosive effect on representative parliamentary democracy. We heard this again and again this week, from politicians and academic experts. The plebiscite was great. Now never do it again. We must undermine the vital principle of representative democracy, they warn us. This is like the joke Ronald Reagan liked to make about economists. An economist is someone who says, it may work in practice, but can it work in theory? As the name implies, in a representative democracy it's the representatives who make the decisions on the people's behalf. The people get to choose a local MP and some senators every 3 years, but then that's the end of their say. They have delegated all their power to their representatives. But, as Smith acknowledges, faith in this system has collapsed. And the people who have undermined it more than anyone else are the representatives themselves. As the keeper of the Australian electoral study, Anus Ian McAllister, told us after the last election, trust in politicians is at its lowest at any time since we started surveying it, all the way back to 1969. The latest figures were so low that McAllister said he thought it was a data loading error and I had to go back to check the numbers. Over that span the proportion of voters saying that government in Australia could be trusted fell from 51% to 26%. The same-sex marriage plebiscite was called because the political system was incapable of making a decision. If the system is failing and Parliament paralysed, why not use plebiscites more often? It's always possible that public opinion alone can lead to perverse outcomes, as we saw this week. The New South Wales government says that Sydney's newest public ferry is to be named Ferry MC Fairface, the result of a public naming competition. The other 5 new ferries are named after eminent doctors like Victor Chang or Aboriginal leaders like Pemule Wood. The ridiculous name of the 6th is an example of how public opinion sometimes needs to be tempered by leadership.